The United States is a dream country for many, but like any other place on the planet, it has its own characteristics, which can become a challenge for tourists, immigrants, and even local residents. This story is not an attempt to devalue the opportunities that America offers, but rather an honest look at those aspects that can cause difficulties or disappointments. Here are 50 reasons that should be taken into account when planning a trip or moving to the United States. From high prices and difficulties with transport to cultural differences and environmental problems, each item is based on real facts and experience. I hope this list will help you better prepare, avoid surprises, and make your stay in the United States more comfortable and conscious. High cost of life. The USA is one of the most expensive countries for life, especially when compared with many countries in Europe, Asia, or Latin America. Here are the main aspects that make life in the United States expensive. Housing. Renting or buying real estate in large cities such as New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles can be astronomically expensive. For example, the average cost of renting a one-room apartment in Manhattan can reach $3,000 to $4,000 per month. Even in less prestigious areas, prices remain high. Food. Although in the USA there is access to cheap fast foods, high-quality foods, especially organic ones, are expensive. Visiting restaurants can also seriously hit the budget, as tips, 15 to 20%, are added to the account. Transport. If you live in a city with poorly developed public transport, you will need a car, which means costs for gasoline, insurance, maintenance, and parking. Medicine. Even with medical insurance, visiting a doctor or buying medicines can cost hundreds of dollars. Taxes. Depending on the state, income taxes, purchases, and real estate can be very high. For example, in California, income tax can reach 13.3%. For many immigrants or tourists, such a cost of life is a surprise, especially if they come from countries with lower prices. This requires careful budget planning and can limit the possibilities for travel or entertainment. Medical services are expensive and difficult to afford. The U.S. medical system is known for its high cost and complexity. These are the main reasons why this can be a problem for tourists or immigrants. High prices. Medical services in the USA are one of the most expensive in the world. For example, a simple visit to a doctor can do in $100, $100, $300 without insurance. And treatment in a hospital or emergency assistance can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Even an ambulance call can cost $1,000, $1,000, $2,000. Insurance is required. Without medical insurance, the risk of financial collapse in case of illness or injury is extremely high. However, insurance itself is also expensive. For tourists, this means the need to buy special insurance policies that may not be cheap. System complexity. U.S. medical system is confused even for local residents. Different insurance covers different services, and often you have to figure out for a long time what exactly is included in your policy. Waiting for a record. In some cases, an appointment with a doctor can take weeks or even months, especially when it comes to specialists. This can be unusual for those who are used to more operational medical care in other countries. Limited availability in rural areas. In small cities and rural areas, access to quality medical care may be limited. The nearest hospital or specialist can be for hundreds of kilometers. For tourists, this means that even a slight trauma or illness can turn into serious financial cause. Therefore, before a trip to the United States, it is extremely important to arrange reliable medical insurance and be prepared for possible difficulties. Complex visa system. Obtaining a visa in the United States can be a real test, especially for citizens of countries that are not included in the visa free entry program, ESTA. Here are the main difficulties that those who wish to visit the United States are faced. A long process. A visa supply takes time. It is necessary to fill out the DS-160 questionnaire, pay for the consular fee, which may be rather big, sign up for an interview at the embassy or consulate, and wait for your turn. Sometimes the expectation of the recording can take several months. Interview. At an interview at the embassy, you need to prove that you have good reasons to return to your country, work, family, property. This can be a stressful experience, especially if you are not sure of your answers. Refusals without explanation of reasons. A consular officer can refuse a visa without explanation. This can happen even if you have all the necessary documents. Limited validity. The tourist visa B1, B2 is usually issued for 10 years, but this does not guarantee that you can be in the USA all this time. Each entrance is limited by a period that the officer determines at the border, usually up to 6 months. Difficulties for certain professions. People working in sensitive areas, for example, IT, science, military industry, may encounter additional checks or refusals due to suspicion of espionage. High cost. A consular fee for a tourist visa is $188, and this does not guarantee a successful visa. If you are refused, the money is not returned. Additional checks. After the interview, you may be sent for an administrative audit, which can take weeks or even months. For many tourists and immigrants, this process becomes a serious barrier. Even if you received a visa, there's always a risk that you can deploy you on the border if the officer considers that you violate the entry rules. For example, if you do not have enough money or you cannot clearly explain the purpose of the visit. The risk of encountering firearms. The problem of firearms in the United States is one of the most discussed in the world. That is why this can be a serious reason for concern. Statistics. The United States leads in the number of firearms among developed countries. Every year, tens of thousands of cases of violence using firearms, including murders, accidents, and mass executions, occur here. The availability of weapons. In the United States, it is relatively easy to buy firearms. In some states, this does not even require a license. This leads to the fact that many citizens have weapons, including those who can use it for other purposes. Mass executions. Schools, shopping centers, cinemas, and other public places periodically become places of mass executions. Such events receive a wide resonance in the media, but unfortunately continue to occur. Crime in cities. In some areas of large cities, for example, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, the crime level associated with weapons is especially high. Tourists are recommended to avoid such areas, but it is not always easy to understand where it is safe and where not. Police operations. Police in the United States often encounters armed criminals, which leads to shootings. In such situations, random passers-by can also suffer. Psychological discomfort. Even if you never encounter violence personally, awareness of such a problem can cause a constant feeling of anxiety, especially if you travel with children. For many tourists, especially from countries with strict control over weapons, this can become a shock. Although the chances of becoming a victim of violence are still small, the fact of such an opportunity can scare away from a trip to the United States. The U.S. tax system is considered one of the most difficult in the world. That is why this can become a problem for tourists, immigrants, and even local residents. Many taxes. There are many types of taxes in the USA: federal income tax, state taxes, real estate taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes, and much more. Each state has its own tax rates and rules, which makes the system even more confusing. The complexity of the declaration. Even if you just work in the United States temporarily, you will need to fill out a tax return. This requires time, knowledge, and often the help of a professional accountant. Errors in the declaration can lead to fines. Taxes for foreigners. If you are a tax resident of the United States, for example, you live in the country for more than 183 days a year, you are required to pay taxes from all your income, including those received outside the United States. This may be a surprise to immigrants. Sales taxes. In the USA, there is no single sales tax rate. She varies from state to state and even from city to city. For example, in some states, sales tax can reach 10%, which significantly increases the cost of purchases. Real estate taxes. If you decide to buy housing in the United States, be prepared for annual real estate tax, which can be 1 to 2% of the cost of property. Fines for errors. The U.S. Tax Service, IRS, strictly monitors compliance with tax legislation. Errors in the declaration or tax failure can lead to serious fines and even trials. For tourists, this may be less relevant, but if you plan to work, study, or live in the USA, the tax system will become one of the main headaches. Even local residents often hire accountants to understand all the intricacies. Problems with public transport in most cities. Public transport in the United States, with the exception of several large cities, leaves much to be desired. Here are the main problems that tourists and local residents face. Dependence on cars. In most U.S. cities, public transport is poorly developed, and people are forced to move in personal cars. This is especially problematic for tourists who do not want or cannot rent a car. Limited coding. In small cities and suburbs, buses and trains rarely go, and routes can be uncomfortable. For example, in order to get from one area to another, it may take several transfers and a lot of time. Low frequency of movement. Even in large cities such as Los Angeles, buses and trains can walk every 30-60 minutes, which makes their use uncomfortable. Safety. In some cities, public transport, especially at night, can be unsafe. Tourists may encounter pockets, aggressive passengers, or other unpleasant situations. Lack of infrastructure. In many cities, there are no convenient pedestrian zones, bicycle paths, or crossings, which makes movement without a car even more complicated. Problems with accessibility. For people with disabilities, public transport can be unavailable. Not all metro and bus stations are equipped with ramps or elevators. The exception is cities such as New York, Washington, Chicago, and San Francisco, where metro and buses are better developed. However, even there, the system can be confusing for tourists, especially if they do not speak English. High prices for education. Education in the USA, especially the higher, is considered one of the most expensive in the world. That is why this can be a serious problem for students and their families. The cost of training. A year of study at a prestigious university such as Harvard, Stanford, or MIT can cost from $50,000 to $50,000 to $70,000 or more. Even in state universities, the cost for foreign students can reach $30,000 to $30,000, $40,000 per year. Additional expenses. In addition to training fees, students should take into account housing costs, meals, textbooks, transport, and medical insurance. This can add another $15,000, $20,000 per year. Education loans. Many American students are forced to take education loans, which they then pay for years or even for decades. For foreign students, access to such loans is limited, and they have to look for other sources of financing. The difference in cost for residents and non-residents. In state universities, the cost of training for the state residents, in-state tuiut, or foreign students or foreign students or foreign students. This makes education even less accessible to those who are not a resident. Limited scholarships. Although there are many scholarships and grants in the USA, competition for them is extremely high. Many scholarships cover only part of the cost of training, and students still have to look for additional sources of financing. Quality of education. Despite the high cost, not all universities in the United States offer quality education. Some colleges, especially commercial ones, can be more interested in profit than in the training of students. For many students from other countries, especially from developing countries, the high cost of education in the United States becomes an insurmountable barrier. Even if they get a visa and enter the university, the financial burden can be too heavy. Cultural differences can cause misunderstandings. The United States is a country with a huge cultural variety, but for tourists and immigrants, this can become a source of misunderstanding and difficulties. Here are the main aspects that can cause misunderstandings. Language barrier. Although English is the main language, accent, slang, and idioms can be very different in different regions. For example, what is clear in New York may not be clear in Texas. Different norms of behavior. In the USA, it is customary to be friendly and open, but sometimes this can be perceived as obsession. For example, the question, "How are you?" This is just a form of politeness and not an invitation to a long conversation. Tips. In the United States, tips, 15-20%, are mandatory in restaurants, cafes, taxis, and even in some hotels. For tourists from countries where tips are not common, it can be unusual. Personal space. Americans value personal space, but at the same time, they can be very talkative with strangers. This can cause bewilderment in those who are used to more restrained communication. Power culture. In the USA, it is customary to eat on the go, order food, and often visit fast foods. For those who are used to long family dinners, it may seem strange. Holidays and traditions. Some American holidays, such as Thanksgiving or Halloween, may be incomprehensible to foreigners. Also in the USA, traditions related to gifts, congratulations, and behavior at events are very different. Politics and religion. In the USA, these topics can be very sensitive. Discussion of politics or religion with unfamiliar people can lead to conflicts. For tourists and immigrants, it is important to be prepared for these differences and try to adapt to local standards. However, even this may arise situations that cause bewilderment or discomfort. Ecology problems in large cities, environmental problems in large cities in the United States can be a serious minus for tourists and residents. Here are the main aspects that cause concern. Air pollution. In megalopolises such as Los Angeles, Houston, or New York, the level of air pollution can be very high. This is especially noticeable in hot summer days when I was formed over the city. Traffic jams. In large cities, traffic jams are a common occurrence. Long-standing in traffic jams not only spends time, but also increases emissions of harmful substances into the atmosphere. Noise pollution. In large cities, constant noise from transport, construction, and people can cause stress and fatigue. This is especially problematic for those who are used to silence. Garbage. In some areas of large cities, you can encounter the problem of garbage on the streets. This is due to the high population density and sometimes insufficient attention to cleaning. Water problems. In some regions, for example in California, there are periodically problems with lack of water. This can lead to restrictions on the use of water for residents and tourists. Urbanization. The active construction and expansion of cities lead to the destruction of natural zones. This reduces the number of green spaces and parks that could serve the light city. Problems with public beaches. In some coastal cities, such as Los Angeles or Miami, the quality of water on the beaches can be low due to pollution. For tourists, especially those who appreciate clean air and nature, environmental problems in large cities in the United States can become serious disappointment. Even a short-term stay in such conditions can adversely affect health and a general impression of the trip. Limited vacation compared to other countries. In the United States, the culture of labor and rest is significantly different from many other countries, especially European ones. That is why this can become a problem for tourists and immigrants. Short paid leave. On average, American workers receive only 10 to 15 days of paid leave per year. This is much less than in most European countries, where the standard is 20 to 30 days. Lack of guaranteed leave. In the USA, there is no federal law that obliges employers to provide paid leave. This means that some employees, especially in low-paid sectors, may not have a vacation at all. Culture, always in touch. In the USA, it is customary to be accessible for work even during vacation. Many employees check work mail or respond to calls, which makes the rest less complete. Limited sick leave. Unlike many other countries, in the United States, paid hospital days are not required. This means that workers can work even during illness so as not to lose income. A long working day. In the United States, a standard working day often lasts 8 to 10 hours, and in some industries, for example finances or technology, even longer. This leaves little time for relaxation and personal life. Lack of long weekends. In the USA, there are fewer public holidays than in some other countries, and they are rarely transferred to Monday or Friday to create a long weekend. For tourists, this may be less relevant, but for those who plan to work or live in the United States, limited leave can be a serious minus. This is especially noticeable for immigrants from countries where long vacation is the norm. High housing prices. The cost of housing in the United States, especially in large cities and popular tourist zones, can be extremely high. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Rent. In cities such as New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, renting a one-room apartment can cost from $2,000 to $2,000 to $4,000 per month. Even in less prestigious areas, prices remain high. Buying real estate. The cost of buying housing in large cities can reach millions of dollars. For example, the average price of a house in San Francisco is about $1.5 million. Deposits and commissions. When renting housing, it is often required to make a deposit, usually equal to 1 or 2 months of rent, and pay for the realtor commission, another month of rent. This makes the initial cost very high. Utilities. In addition to rent or mortgages, residents must pay for utilities: electricity, gas, water, internet, which can add hundreds of dollars to monthly expenses. Limited proposal. In popular cities, housing demand significantly exceeds the supply, which leads to an increase in prices. This is especially noticeable in areas with good infrastructure and transport accessibility. tourist zones, in places such as Miami, Hawaii, or resort cities of California, housing prices can be even higher due to high demand from tourists. For tourists, this means that living in the United States can be very expensive, especially if you want to stay in the city center or in a popular area. For immigrants and local residents, high housing prices often cause financial stress and forced to look for cheaper options in suburbs or less prestigious areas. Difficulties in rental housing for foreigners. Housing in the United States can be a difficult task for foreigners, especially for those who have just arrived in the country. Here are the main problems that they face. The claim of credit history. Many landlords require credit score to make sure that the tenant will be able to pay for rent in a timely manner. Foreigners, especially just arriving, have no such story, which makes the rent difficult. Deposits and commissions. As already mentioned, tenants should often make a deposit, security deposit, and pay for a realtor commission. For foreigners, this can be an unexpectedly high amount. Requirement of recommendations. Some lessons are asked to provide recommendations from previous lesslers or employers. Foreigners, especially tourists, may not have such recommendations. Limited options. In popular cities and areas, competition for housing is very high. Lessors can prefer local residents or those who have a stable job in the United States. Language barrier. If you do not speak freely in English, communication with landlords or realtors can be difficult. This can lead to misunderstanding or even fraud. Additional documents. Some lessons may require additional documents such as a visa, confirmation of income, or bank extracts. For tourists or students, this can be problematic. Fraud. In the USA, as in any other country, there is a risk of fraud for renting housing. For example, you may be offered an apartment that has already been rented, or demand an advance payment for non-existent housing. For tourists and immigrants, it is important to be careful and carefully check all the details before signing the lease. It is also worth considering alternative options, such as short-term rental through Airbnb or accommodation in hostels. The risk of natural disasters. Hurricanes, tornado, earthquakes. The USA is a country with a variety of climate and geography, which makes it subject to various natural disasters. Here are the main risks that tourists and residents may encounter. Hurricanes. The east coast of the United States, especially Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, often suffers from hurricanes. These powerful storms can cause floods, destruction, and interruptions with electricity. The hurricane season lasts from June to November. Tornado. In the central part of the United States, known as the Tornado Alley, tornado often occurs. These vortices can be extremely destructive and life-threatening. Earthquakes. Western coast, especially California, is located in a seismically active zone. Earthquakes can occur suddenly and cause significant destruction. Flooding. In some regions, such as the Mississippi Valley or coastal areas, floods are a frequent occurrence. They can be caused by both hurricanes and heavy rains. Forest fires. In dry regions such as California or Arizona, forest fires are a serious problem. They can quickly spread and destroy large territories. Snowstorms. In the northern states, such as New York or Michigan, there are often strong snowstorms in winter. They can paralyze transport and cause interruptions in electricity. For tourists, this means that before the trip, it is important to study weather forecasts and be prepared for possible emergency situations. For immigrants and local residents, this can become a constant source of stress and additional costs for insurance and preparation for cataclysms. Problems with mobile communications and the internet in some regions. Despite the fact that the United States is a technologically developed country, some regions may arise problems with mobile communications and the internet. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. Limited coding. In rural areas, mountainous areas, or national parks, mobile covering can be weak or completely absent. This may complicate the connection in emergency situations. High cost. Mobile communications and internet tariffs can be more expensive than in other countries. For example, an unlimited tariff with the internet can cost $50, $100 per month. Roaming restrictions. If you use a foreign SIM card, roaming in the United States can be very expensive. It is better to buy a local SIM card, but even this may be inconvenient for short-term trips. Internet quality. In some regions, especially in rural areas, the internet speed can be low. This may be a problem for those who work remotely or depends on a stable connection. Restrictions on public Wi-Fi. In the USA, public Wi-Fi is often limited in speed or requires payment. Free Wi-Fi can be available in cafes or hotels, but its quality is not always satisfactory. Problems with operators. There are several large operators in the USA, for example, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, but their coverage and quality of services may vary greatly depending on the region. For tourists, this may mean that in some places they will be left without communication, which is especially dangerous in the case of emergency situations. For immigrants and local residents, this can be a source of disappointment, especially if they are used to more affordable and reliable communication services in other countries. High prices for gasoline. Although gasoline prices in the United States are lower than in some European countries, they can still be significant, especially for tourists and those who are used to cheaper fuel. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. Regional differences. Gasoline prices vary greatly depending on the state. For example, in California, the price of gallon, about 3.78 liters, can be higher than 5. Then Cacotacasa, Ukolo 5, then Cacacuejas, Okolo 3. Dependence on the car. In most U.S. regions, public transport is poorly developed, and people are forced to move in personal cars. This means that gasoline expenses become a permanent budget item. Long distances. The USA is a large country, and hundreds of kilometers can occupy trips between cities or states. This increases fuel costs, especially if you travel by car. Additional expenses. In addition to gasoline, car owners should take into account the cost of insurance, maintenance, parking, and paid roads. Environmental taxes. In some states, such as California, additional environmental taxes for gasoline are valid, which makes it even more expensive. The influence of world prices. Gasoline prices in the United States depend on world oil prices, which can fluctuate due to political or economic events. For tourists, especially those who plan to rent a car for travel, high gas prices can be a surprise and significantly increase the trip budget. For local residents, this is a permanent expense item that can be especially burdensome for low-income families. Difficulties with parking in large cities. Parking in large cities in the United States can be a real test for drivers. Here are the main problems that they face. A limited number of places. In cities such as New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, it can be extremely difficult to find a free place for parking, especially in the city center or in popular areas. High cost. Parking in large cities can be very expensive. For example, like a parking hour in the center of New York can cost $10 to $20, and daily parking is $50 or more. Complex rules. In every city and even the area, there may be its own parking rules. For example, in some places, parking is prohibited at certain hours or days, while in others a special resolution is required. The risk of fines. Violation of parking rules can lead to fines that can reach hundreds of dollars. Also, the car can be evacuated, which will entail additional costs. Narrow streets. In some old areas, the streets are very narrow, which makes the parking lot even for experienced drivers. Limited time. In some places, parking is limited in time, for example 2 hours, which may be inconvenient if you plan to spend more time in this place. Problems with parking garages. In large cities, parking garages can be crowded, and their cost can be high. They also often have narrow driveways and a limited space for maneuvers. For tourists, especially those who are not used to such conditions, parking in large cities can become a source of stress and additional costs. For local residents, this is a constant headache, especially if they are forced to park on the street every day. Limited opportunities for pedestrians. In the USA, especially in suburbs and small cities, the infrastructure is often focused on cars, which makes the life of pedestrians uncomfortable. Here are the main problems that they face. The absence of sidewalks. In many areas, especially in the suburbs, sidewalks are simply absent. This makes pedestrian walks dangerous as you have to go along the side of the road. Long distances. In the USA, everything is located far from each other. Shops, restaurants, and other places can be at a distance of several kilometers, making hiking uncomfortable. Dangerous transitions. Even in cities, pedestrian crossings can be uncomfortable or dangerous. Drivers are not always giving way to pedestrians, and traffic lights can be tuned so that pedestrians have to wait long. Lack of pedestrian zones. Unlike many European cities, there are few pedestrian zones or streets closed to cars in the United States. This makes walks less pleasant. Problems with accessibility. For people with disabilities, moving around the city can be especially complicated due to the lack of ramps, elevators, or other amenities. Climate conditions. In some regions, such as Arizona or Texas, it is very hot in the summer, which makes hiking uncomfortable. In the northern states in winter, it can be too cold or slippery. Lack of infrastructure. In the USA, there are few bicycle paths, benches, or other amenities for pedestrians. This makes walks less pleasant and comfortable. For tourists, especially those who are used to the pedestrian cities of Europe or Asia, this can be a serious disappointment. For local residents, this means that they are forced to depend on cars more, which increases expenses and reduces the quality of life. High level of stress and competition. Life in the United States is often associated with a high level of stress and competition, which can adversely affect mental and physical health. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Working culture. In the United States, it is customary to work a lot and intensively. A long working day, overtime, and constant availability for work, even on vacation, is the norm. This leads to chronic stress and fatigue, competition at work. In the USA, a high level of competition in the labor market. People are often forced to constantly prove their value in order to maintain work or get an increase. Financial stress, high cost of life, debts for education, mortgages, and medical expenses create constant financial pressure. Social pressure. In the USA, there is a culture of success where it is important to be the best in everything: career, appearance, and lifestyle. This creates additional pressure and a sense of inferiority. Limited vacation. As already mentioned, in the USA, short paid leave, which does not allow you to fully rest and recover. Problems with the balance of work and personal life. Many Americans are faced with difficulties in maintaining the balance between work and personal life. This can lead to family problems and relationships, a high pace of life. In large cities, life takes place at a fast pace, which can be tiring for those who are used to a calmer rhythm. For tourists, this can be less noticeable, but for immigrants and local residents, a high level of stress and competition becomes a constant life partner. This can lead to burnout, depression, and other health problems. Problems with food quality. Fast food, GMO. The quality of food in the United States often causes complaints, especially in those who are used to more natural and healthy products. Here are the main problems associated with nutrition. Fast food. In the USA, fast food is an integral part of culture. Restaurants of fast food such as McDonald's, Burger King, and KFC are on every corner. Although it is convenient, such food often contains many calories, sugar, salt, and harmful fats. GMOs. Genetically modified organisms. GMOs in agriculture are widely used in the USA. Many products such as corn, soy, and rapeseed are genetically modified. This causes fears in those who prefer natural products. Processed products. U.S. supermarkets have a huge selection of processed products that contain many additives, preservatives, and artificial flavors. This can be harmful to health with regular use. Low quality of meat and dairy products. In the USA, hormones and antibiotics in animal husbandry are often used, which can adversely affect the quality of meat and dairy products. Limited access to organic products. Although organic products are available, they are often much more expensive than usual. This makes them inaccessible to many people. Large portions. In the USA, it is customary to give large portions, which contributes to overeating and obesity. Lack of fresh products. In some areas, especially in food deserts, access to fresh fruits and vegetables is limited. For tourists, this may mean that finding healthy and high-quality food can be difficult, especially if you do not know where to look. For local residents, this causes health problems, such as obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. Limited access to historical attractions. Although the United States is a country with a rich history, access to historical attractions can be limited compared to other countries. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. Young story. Compared to Europe, Asia, or Africa, the history of the United States is relatively young. This means that there are fewer ancient monuments and architectural masterpieces, a limited number of objects. In the United States, there are several famous historical places such as Independence Hall in Philadelphia or Lincoln Memorial in Washington, but their number is less than in countries with a longer history. Development. Many historical attractions are located far from each other. For example, in order to visit both Boston and San Francisco, you need to overcome thousands of kilometers. Commercialization. Some historical places can be too commercialized, which reduces their authenticity and atmosphere. For example, souvenir shops and restaurants are located around many attractions. Limited information. In some places, information about historical events can be submitted one-sided or not in detail, which makes the visit less interesting. Problems with accessibility. Some historical objects can be inaccessible to people with disabilities or for those who do not have a car. Competition with natural attractions. There are many natural parks and reserves in the USA which often attract more attention than historical places. For tourists, especially those who are interested in history and culture, this can be a disappointment. However, the United States has its own unique historical places, such as the Colonial Williamsburg or the National Museum of American History, which may be interesting to visit. Difficulties with a language barrier in some regions. Although English is the main language in the United States, in some regions a language barrier can become a problem for tourists and immigrants. These are the main reasons why this is happening. Regional accents. In different regions of the United States, English can sound differently. For example, accents in Texas, New York, or South can be difficult to understand, even for those who know English well. Spanish. In some regions, especially in California, Texas, and Florida, the Spanish language is widespread. In such places, you may encounter the fact that local residents prefer to speak in Spanish, not English. Idioms and slang. American English is full of idioms, slang, and abbreviations that may be incomprehensible to foreigners. For example, phrases like hit the road, set off on the road, or break a leg, good luck, can cause bewilderment. Limited knowledge of English. In some areas, especially in ethnic enclaves, local residents can speak English poorly. This may complicate communication in stores, restaurants, or public places. Problems with translation. In tourist places, information in other languages may be limited. This may complicate the navigation or understanding of the rules and instructions. Cultural differences. Even if you know English, cultural differences can lead to misunderstanding. For example, Americans often use sarcasm or jokes that can be incomprehensible to foreigners. For tourists, this may mean that even with good knowledge of English, difficulties in communication may arise. For immigrants, a language barrier can be a serious obstacle to integration into society and work search. High prices for entertainment. Entertainment in the United States can be quite expensive, especially in large cities and popular tourist zones. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. Tickets for events, concerts, sporting events, and theatrical productions can cost hundreds of dollars. For example, a ticket for a popular concert or match of NBA can cost $200, $200, $500 or more. Thematic parks. A visit to parks such as Disneyland or Universal Studios can be very expensive. Tickets for one day can cost $100 to $100 to $150 per person, and taking into account food, souvenirs, and parking, expenses can increase significantly. Cinemas. Tickets for cinemas in the United States are also expensive, especially in large cities. The average ticket price is $10 to $10.15, and taking into account popcorn and drinks, a trip to the cinema can cost $30, $50 per person. Restaurants and bars. Dinner in a middle-level restaurant can cost $50, $100 per person, and in prestigious institutions, $200 or more. Alcohol is also expensive, especially in bars and clubs. Museums and exhibitions. Entrance tickets to museums and exhibitions can cost $20, $30 per person. Some museums offer discounts or free days, but this is not always convenient for tourists. Tours and excursions. Organized tours and excursions, especially in popular places such as the Grand Canyon or the Niagara Waterfall, can be very expensive. Sports events. Attending sporting events such as NFL, NBA, or MLB matches can cost hundreds of dollars, especially if you want to sit close to field or arena. For tourists, this means that the budget for entertainment can be significantly exceeded, especially if you travel with family or friends. For local residents, high prices for entertainment can limit their opportunities for relaxation and leisure. Problems with the availability of alcohol in some states. In the USA, laws governing the sale and consumption of alcohol are greatly varied from state to state. Here are the main problems that tourists and local residents may encounter. Dry districts. In some states, such as Kansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, there are dry districts where the sale of alcohol is completely prohibited. This may be a surprise to tourists, a limited sale time. In some states, alcohol can only be bought at certain hours. For example, in Pennsylvania, wine and strong drinks are sold only in specialized stores that are closed early. Age restrictions. In the USA, the minimum age for the purchase and consumption of alcohol is 21 years. This is strictly controlled, and sellers can ask for an identity certificate, even from those who look older. High prices. Alcohol in the USA can be expensive, especially in restaurants and bars. For example, a bottle of wine in a restaurant can cost 2 to 3 times more than in a store. Limited range. In some states, such as Utah, the range of alcoholic beverages may be limited. For example, in UTA, strong drinks are sold only in state stores, and the content of alcohol in beer is limited. Difficulties with delivery. In some states, alcohol delivery to the house is prohibited or limited. This may be inconvenient for those who want to order drinks at the hotel or for the event. Local laws. In some cities and districts, there may be additional restrictions on the sale and consumption of alcohol. For example, in some places, it is forbidden to drink alcohol on the street or in parks. For tourists, this may mean that planning a party or just buying a bottle of wine can turn into a difficult task. For local residents, such restrictions can be a source of disappointment, especially if they move from a state with more liberal laws. Strict laws that may be incomprehensible to foreigners. In the USA, there are many laws that may seem strange or incomprehensible to foreigners. Here are the main examples that can cause bewilderment or even problems. Parking laws. In some cities, parking is prohibited on certain days for cleaning streets. If you leave the car in the wrong place, it can be evacuated and you can write out a fine. Noise laws. The U.S. level is strictly regulated in the United States, especially at night. For example, loud music or noisy parties after 22 unlocked can lead to complaints of neighbors and police visit. Smoking laws. Smoking is prohibited in many public places, including restaurants, bars, and even some parks. In some states, such as California, smoking is also prohibited in private cars if children are in them. Laws on alcohol. As already mentioned, in some states there are strict restrictions on the sale and consumption of alcohol. For example, in some places it is forbidden to drink alcohol on the street or in parks. Laws on weapons. In the USA, laws on wearing and storing weapons vary greatly from state to state. In some states, open weapons are allowed, while in others, this is strictly prohibited. Laws on animals. In some cities and states, there are strict rules for keeping pets. For example, in New York, it is forbidden to leave a dog tied on the street for more than 3 hours. Laws on garbage. In the USA, sorting and disposal of garbage is strictly regulated. For example, in some cities, for improper sorting of garbage, they can write out a fine. For tourists, this means that even a slight violation of local laws can lead to fines or other problems. For immigrants, this can become a source of stress, especially if they are not familiar with local rules. The risk of facing racism or discrimination. Despite the fact that the United States is a multinational and multicultural country, the problems of racism and discrimination still exist. Here are the main aspects that can cause concern. Race prejudices. In some regions, especially in the southern states, there are still racial prejudices. This can be manifested in the form of a negative attitude, stereotypes, or even open hostility. Discrimination at work. Immigrants and minority representatives can face discrimination when hiring, promoting, or wages. Police discrimination. In the USA, there is a problem of racial discrimination by the police. Representatives of the African American and Latin American communities are more often subjected to stops, searches, and detentions. Language discrimination. People who speak English poorly or have emphasis can face a negative attitude in public places, stores, or institutions. Religious discrimination. Muslims, Sikhs, and representatives of other religions can face prejudices and discrimination, especially after terrorist attacks or political events. Sexism. Women, especially in a professional environment, can face sexism, including unequal wages, harassment, and limited opportunities for career growth. Age discrimination. Older people and youth can also face discrimination, for example, when applying for a job or in public places. For tourists, this may mean that they may encounter a negative attitude, especially if they belong to minorities or have an unusual appearance. For immigrants, this can be a serious barrier to integrate into society and search for work. Limited opportunities for traveling within the country without a car. The United States is a huge country with great distances between cities and attractions. That is why traveling inside the country without a car can be difficult. Weakly developed public transport. In most U.S. regions, public transport is poorly developed, especially between cities. Buses and trains rarely go, and routes can be uncomfortable. The high cost of air tickets. Internal flights to the United States can be expensive, especially if they are booking at the last moment. This makes long distances costly. Limited routes. In some regions, especially in rural areas, public transport may be completely absent. This makes traveling without a car almost impossible. For a long time, traveling by bus or train can take a lot of time due to long distances and a rare schedule. Problems with car rental. If you decide to rent a car, it can be expensive, especially for young drivers or foreigners. Difficulties with paperwork may also arise. Limited opportunities for pedestrians. In most cities and suburbs, the infrastructure is focused on cars, which makes pedestrian walks uncomfortable or even dangerous. Problems with parking. If you still decide to rent a car in large cities, there may be problems with parking, which can be expensive and inaccessible. For tourists, this means that travel planning within the country can be difficult and costly, especially if you do not want or cannot rent a car. For local residents, this limits the possibilities for travel and rest. High prices for air tickets within the country. Traveling in the USA by plane can be expensive, especially if you plan to visit several cities. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. The high cost of tickets. Internal flights to the United States can cost more than international flights. For example, a flight from New York to Los Angeles can cost $200 to $400 or more, depending on the time of reservation and season. Additional fees. Airlines often charge additional luggage fees, selection of a place, and other services. This can significantly increase the cost of the ticket. Limited promotions and discounts. Unlike Europe or Asia, there are fewer promotions and discounts on internal flights in the United States. This makes travels more costly. Long transplants. If you are flying to a small city or regional airport, you may have to make transfers, which increases the travel and ticket time. A limited number of budget airlines. In the USA, there are fewer budget airlines than in other regions of the world. This limits the possibilities for saving. High prices in peak seasons. On holidays such as Thanksgiving or Christmas, ticket prices can increase significantly. Schedule problems. In some regions, flights can be rare, which limits flexibility in travel planning. For tourists, this means that traveling within the country can be expensive and require careful planning. For local residents, this limits the possibilities for travel and rest, especially for families with a limited budget. Problems with the quality of roads in some regions. Despite the fact that the United States is known for its highways and a developed road network, the quality of roads in some regions may leave much to be desired. Here are the main problems that drivers may encounter. Potholes and bumps. In some cities and states, roads are in poor condition with potholes and bumps that can damage the car. Limited maintenance. In rural areas and small cities, roads can rarely be repaired, which leads to their deterioration. Problems with markings. In some places, marking on the roads can be erased or obscure, which complicates navigation and increases the risk of accidents. Limited lighting. In rural areas and on some highway, lighting can be insufficient, which makes night driving dangerous. Problems with drainage. In regions with frequent rains or floods, poor drainage can lead to puddles and flooding of roads. Snow and ice. In the northern states in winter, roads can be covered with snow and ice, which requires the use of winter tires and careful driving. Traffic jams and overload. In large cities, the roads are often overloaded, which leads to traffic jams and deterioration of the condition of the road surface. For tourists, this means that driving in some regions can be uncomfortable and even dangerous. For local residents, this becomes a source of additional expenses for car repair and increased travel time. Difficulties with the search for work for foreigners. Searching for work in the United States for foreigners can be difficult and require significant efforts. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Working visa. For working in the United States, most foreigners need a work visa, for example, H-1B. Obtaining such a visa can be a complex and expensive process, and the number of visas is limited. Competition. In the labor market in the United States, high competition, especially in popular industries such as IT, finances, and medicine. Foreigners often compete with local specialists and other immigrants. Language barrier. Even if you know English well, emphasis or insufficient ownership of professional vocabulary can be an obstacle to employment. Qualification requirements. The USA often requires qualification confirmation such as diplomas, certificates, or licenses. For foreigners, this may mean the need to pass additional exams or courses. Limited possibilities for illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants are faced with serious restrictions in the search for work. They can only work in unofficial sectors where often low payment and poor working conditions. Discrimination. Foreigners, especially from certain countries or ethnic groups, may come across discrimination when applying for work. Difficulties with a network of contacts. In the USA, professional ties and recommendations play an important role. Foreigners, especially just arriving, may not have such a network that complicates the search for work. For tourists who want to work in the United States temporarily, it can be especially difficult, since most working visas require the employer sponsor. For immigrants, this becomes a serious barrier to integration and financial stability. High purchase taxes in some states, sales taxes in the United States can significantly increase the cost of purchases, especially in some states. Here are the main aspects that can cause bewilderment or inconvenience. Different rates. Sales tax varies from state to state and even from city to city. For example, in California it can reach 10%, and in Oregon or Delaware there is no sales tax at all. Unpredictability. The price of the goods in the store is often indicated without taking into account the tax, which may be a surprise to tourists. The total amount at the checkout may be higher than you expected. Additional taxes. In some places, additional taxes may be levied, for example, alcohol, tobacco products, or car rental. Limited tax return opportunities. Unlike some countries in the USA, there is no system return on value-added tax, VADTCR, for tourists. High taxes on services. Sales tax applies not only to goods, but also to services, such as restaurants, hotels, and entertainment. This can significantly increase the cost of services. Online purchases. In recent years, many states have begun to levy a sales tax on online purchases, which makes them less profitable. Luxury taxes. In some states, there are additional taxes on luxury items, such as expensive cars or jewelry. For tourists, this means that the purchase budget can be significantly exceeded, especially if you do not take into account taxes when planning expenses. For local residents, this becomes an additional financial burden, especially in states with high sales tax rates. Problems with the availability of public toilets. Despite the fact that the United States is a developed country, the availability of public toilets can be a problem, especially in large cities and tourist zones. These are the main reasons why this can be inconvenience. A limited number. In some cities of public toilets, it is simply not enough, especially in parks, on the streets, and in shopping centers. Paid toilets. In some places, especially at stations and at airports, toilets can be paid. This may be a surprise to tourists. Problems with cleanliness. In some public toilets, especially in crowded places, it can be dirty and lack the main amenities such as toilet paper or soap. Limited access. In some places, toilets can be available only for customers, for example, in cafes or restaurants. It may be inconvenient if you just want to use the toilet. Problems with accessibility for people with disabilities. Not all public toilets are equipped with ramps or special cabins for people with disabilities. Limited working hours. In some parks or public places, toilets can be closed in the evening or in non-season. Cultural differences. In the US, toilets are often equipped with large slots between the door and the wall, which can be unusual for tourists from other countries. For tourists, this may mean that the search for the toilet can turn into a real quest, especially if you travel with children or elderly people. For local residents, this becomes a source of inconvenience, especially in large cities. Limited opportunities for cyclists. Although in some US cities, bicycle infrastructure is developed, in most regions, cyclists are faced with serious restrictions. Here are the main problems. Lack of bicycle paths. In many cities and suburbs of bicycle paths, there are very few. This makes cycling dangerous, especially on lively roads. Danger on the roads. Car drivers do not always respect the rights of cyclists, which can lead to accidents. In some states, laws protecting cyclists are weakly enforced. Limited bicycle parking. In most places, the parking for bicycles is limited or absent. This makes the storage of a bicycle uncomfortable, especially in the city center. Climate conditions. In some regions, such as Arizona or Texas, it is too hot in summer for cycling. In the northern states in winter, roads can be covered with snow and ice. Long distances. In the USA, everything is located far from each other, which makes a bicycle inconvenient for everyday trips. Limited support from the authorities. Unlike some European countries, in the USA, bicycle infrastructure is often not a priority for the authorities. Safety problems. Bicycles often become an object of theft, especially in large cities. For tourists who want to explore the cities on a bicycle, this may be a disappointment. For local residents, especially those who prefer environmentally friendly transport, this becomes a serious restriction. High noise level in large cities. Large cities in the United States, such as New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago, are known for their high noise level. These are the main reasons why this can become a problem. Transport noise. Constant noise from cars, buses, trains, and aircraft can be very loud, especially in the city center or near motorways. Construction. In large cities, construction work is carried out almost constantly, which creates additional noise from construction equipment and equipment. Nightlife. In areas with bars, clubs, and restaurants, noise can last until late at night, which interferes with sleeping. Noise from neighbors. In apartment buildings, noise from neighbors, especially if they arrange parties or listen to music loudly, may be a serious problem. Noise from public events. In large cities, festivals, concerts, and other events that create additional noise are often held. Limited sound insulation. In some buildings, especially old, sound insulation can be insufficient, which makes the noise even more noticeable. Health problems. Constant noise can cause stress, insomnia, and other health problems. For tourists, this may mean that rest in large cities can be less comfortable, especially if you stayed in a noisy area. For local residents, this becomes a constant source of stress and discomfort. Problems with the availability of pure drinking water in some regions. Despite the fact that the United States is a developed country, in some regions access to clean drinking water can be limited. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Water pollution. In some areas, especially in rural areas or next to industrial facilities, water can be contaminated with chemicals, heavy metals, or bacteria. Old infrastructure. In some cities, the water system is outdated, which can lead to water pollution with lead or other harmful substances. Water fluoridation. In the United States, water is often fluorine for the prevention of caries, but some people prefer to avoid fluoride due to possible negative health consequences. Limited access to bottled water. In some regions, especially in remote areas, access to bottled water can be limited, and its cost can be high. Ecology problems. In some places, such as California, there are periodically problems with lack of water due to drought or excessive use of water resources. Water quality in public places. In some parks, beaches, or in other public places, access to clean drinking water can be limited. Problems with filtering. Even if the tap water is considered safe, its taste and smell can be unpleasant, which forces people to buy filters or bottled water. For tourists, this may mean that you need to be careful with water, especially if you travel to remote regions. For local residents, this becomes a source of additional expenses and anxiety about health. Difficulties with garbage recycling and processing. In the United States, the waste disposal system and waste processing can be complex and confusing, especially for tourists and new immigrants. Here are the main problems. Different rules in different states. In each state and even the city, there may be its own rules for sorting and disposal of garbage. It may be difficult for those who have just arrived. Limited processing. Not all types of waste can be processed, and not all areas have access to processing programs. For example, in some places do not take glass or certain types of plastic. Difficulties with sorting. In the USA, thoroughly sorting garbage is often required, which may be inconvenient for those who are not used to such rules. Problems with public garbage tanks. In some cities, public garbage tanks are crowded or absent, which leads to pollution of streets and parks. The high cost of disposal. In some places, the disposal of bulky garbage, such as furniture or household appliances, can be paid. Limited awareness. Not all U.S. residents know how to properly sort garbage, which leads to pollution of processed waste. Ecology problems. Incorrect garbage recycling can lead to environmental pollution, including water bodies and soil. For tourists, this may mean that you need to be especially attentive to the rules for the disposal of garbage in order to avoid fines. For local residents, this becomes a source of disappointment, especially if they care about the environment. Limited opportunities for nature in cities. Although there are many national parks and natural reserves in the USA and large cities, access to nature can be limited. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The disadvantage of green areas. In some cities, especially in the center, parks and green areas may not be enough. This makes a vacation in nature inaccessible. Crowded parks. In popular parks such as the Central Park in New York or Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, there may be too many people, which reduces the pleasure of rest. Limited access to reservoirs. In some cities, access to beaches, lakes, or rivers can be limited or paid. Safety problems in some parks, especially in the evening. It can be unsafe due to crime or insufficient lighting. Limited opportunities for outdoor activities. In some cities, there may be not enough infrastructure for outdoor activities, such as bicycle paths, sports grounds, or pedestrian paths. Environmental pollution. In large cities, air and water can be polluted, which makes nature rest less pleasant. Long distances. In order to get to the real nature, you often need to go outside the city, which takes time and transport. For tourists, this may mean that enjoying nature in the city will be difficult, especially if you have a limited time. For local residents, this becomes a source of stress, especially if they want to take a break from the bustle of the city. High prices for insurance. Insurance in the United States can be very expensive, especially for certain categories of people. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Medical insurance. Medical insurance in the USA is one of the most expensive in the world. Even taking into account subsidies, many people pay hundreds of dollars a month for insurance. Auto insurance. The cost of car insurance can be very high, especially for young drivers, residents of large cities, or those who had an accident. Housing insurance. House or apartment insurance can also be expensive, especially in regions subject to natural disasters such as California or Florida. Life insurance. Life insurance can be expensive, especially for people with chronic diseases or risky professions. Additional fees. Many insurance companies charge additional fees for certain services or coatings, which increases the total cost. Limited opportunities for saving. Unlike some countries, the USA has less opportunities for saving on insurance, for example, through group programs or discounts. Difficulties in choosing. In the USA, there are many insurance companies and plans, which makes the choice of suitable insurance product complex and confusing. For tourists, this may mean that you need to be prepared for additional costs for insurance, especially if you plan to rent a car or engage in outdoor activities. For local residents, this becomes a serious financial burden, especially for families with a limited budget. Problems with Wi-Fi availability in public places. Despite the fact that the United States is a technologically developed country, access to free Wi-Fi in public places can be limited. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. A limited number of access points. In some cities and areas, free Wi-Fi can be available only in certain places such as cafes, libraries, or airports. Low speed. Even if Wi-Fi is available, its speed can be low, which makes the use of the internet uncomfortable. Limited use time. In some places, free Wi-Fi can be available only for a limited time or with traffic restrictions. Paid access. In some public places such as hotels or airports, Wi-Fi can be paid, which increases the cost of travel. Safety problems. Free Wi-Fi in public places can be unsafe, which increases the risk of data theft or cyber attacks. Limited access in rural areas. In rural areas, access to Wi-Fi can be limited or completely absent. Connection problems. In some places, the connection to Wi-Fi can be complicated due to a large number of users or technical problems. For tourists, this may mean that you need to be prepared for additional expenses on mobile internet or restrictions on using the internet. For local residents, this becomes a source of inconvenience, especially if they depend on the internet for work or study. Difficulties with car rental for foreigners. Renting a car in the United States can be a difficult task for foreigners, especially for those who are not familiar with local rules and requirements. Here are the main problems that they face. Age requirements. Many car rental companies require the driver to be at least 25 years old. If you are smaller, you may be refused or offer an additional fee. International driver's license. In some states, international driver's license is required while others are quite national. It can be confused for tourists. Additional fees. Car rental may include additional fees, such as a fee for a young driver, insurance, taxes, and fees for a return in another place. Limited choice. In some places, especially in small cities or airports, the choice of cars can be limited and the prices can be high. Insurance problems. Insurance of a rented car can be expensive and confusing. Some credit cards offer insurance, but this must be clarified in advance. Difficulties with navigation. Driving in the United States can be difficult for foreigners, especially if they are not familiar with local traffic rules and road signs. Problems with return. Returning the car in another place can be expensive, and in some cases it is generally impossible. For tourists, this may mean that car rental can be expensive and require careful planning. For local residents who want to rent a car for a trip, this can also become a source of additional costs and inconvenience. Limited opportunities for studying local culture. Despite the fact that the United States is a multicultural country, tourists and immigrants may encounter limited opportunities for a deep study of local culture. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Cultural diversity. In the USA, there are so many different cultures and subcultures that it can be difficult to understand what exactly is a local culture. Commerce. Many cultural events and attractions can be too commercialized, which reduces their authenticity. Limited access to traditions. In some regions, traditional cultural events can be carried out rarely or be inaccessible to tourists. Language barrier. If you do not speak freely in English, communication with local residents and understanding of cultural nuances can be difficult. Limited time. Tourists are often limited in time, which does not allow them to immerse themselves deeply into local culture. Cultural differences. Some aspects of American culture, such as individualism or cultural cult, can be incomprehensible or unusual for foreigners. Limited opportunities for participation. Only local residents can participate in some cultural events or traditions, which limits the possibilities for tourists. For tourists, this may mean that their impressions of local culture will be superficial. For immigrants, this becomes a barrier to integration and understanding of local customs. High prices for books and print media. Books and print media in the United States can be quite expensive, especially for those who are used to more affordable prices in other countries. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The high cost of new books. New books, especially bestsellers, can cost $20, $30 or more. This makes their purchase expensive for many people. Limited discounts. Unlike some countries in the USA, discounts on books can be limited, especially for new publications. The high cost of textbooks. Textbooks for students can cost hundreds of dollars, which makes their purchase with a serious financial burden. Limited access to libraries. In some areas, access to public libraries can be limited, and their funds will be outdated. Delivery problems. If you order books online, delivery can be expensive, especially if you live in a remote area. Limited opportunities for exchange. In the USA, there are fewer opportunities for exchange of books than in some other countries, which makes their purchase the only option. The high cost of magazines and newspapers. Printed magazines and newspapers can also be expensive, especially if you want to subscribe to several publications. For tourists, this may mean that buying books or magazines can significantly increase the trip budget. For local residents, especially students and reading lovers, this becomes a serious financial burden. Problems with the availability of quality medical care in rural areas. In the rural areas of the United States, access to quality medical care may be limited. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The disadvantage of medical institutions. In rural areas, there are often not enough hospitals, clinics, and specialists, which makes access to medical care hard to reach. Long distances. The nearest hospital or doctor can be hundreds of kilometers, making the trip to the doctor long and expensive. A limited choice of specialists. In rural areas, there may not be enough specialists such as cardiologists, oncologists, or pediatricians, which forces people to go to cities. Problems with transport. In rural areas, public transport can be limited, which makes the trip to the doctor even more difficult. High cost. Even if medical care is available, its cost can be high, especially if you do not have insurance. Limited emergency opportunities. In rural areas, an ambulance can get to the patient longer, which increases the risk in emergency situations. Problems with prevention. In rural areas, there may be fewer opportunities for preventive examinations and programs, which increases the risk of diseases. For tourists, this means that in case of illness or injuries in rural areas, it may be difficult to get help. For local residents, this becomes a serious problem, especially for the elderly and families with children. Difficulties with obtaining a loan for foreigners. Obtaining a loan in the United States for foreigners can be difficult and require significant efforts. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Lack of credit history. In the USA, credit history plays a key role in receiving a loan. Foreigners who have just arrived have no such story, which makes the receipt of a loan difficult. Requirements for resident. Many banks and credit organizations require the borrower to be a resident or U.S. citizen. This limits the possibilities for foreigners. High interest rates. If a foreigner still manages to get a loan, interest rates can be significantly higher than for local residents. Limited possibilities for mortgages. Obtaining a mortgage for foreigners can be especially complicated, since banks often require a significant initial contribution and additional guarantees. Difficulties with documents. To obtain a loan, foreigners may need to provide additional documents such as a visa, confirmation of income, or bank extracts. A limited choice of credit products. Only certain types of loans, such as low-limit cards or small consumer loans, can be available to foreigners. The risk of fraud. Foreigners, especially those who know English, can become victims of fraud while trying to get a loan. For tourists, this may be less relevant, but for immigrants who want to buy housing or start a business, this becomes a serious barrier. For local residents who want to help foreign relatives, this can also become a problem. Limited opportunities for vegetarians and vegans. Although in the US there are more and more restaurants and shops offering vegetarian and vegan products, in some regions the choice can be limited. Here are the main problems that vegetarians and vegans face. A limited choice in restaurants. In some regions, especially in small cities and rural areas, restaurants can only offer several vegetarian or vegan dishes. High-cost vegetarian and vegan products, especially organic products, can be more expensive than ordinary products. Marking problems. Not all products in stores have a clear marking, which complicates the choice for vegans that avoid certain ingredients. Limited access to specialized stores. In some areas, there may not be specialized stores offering a wide selection of vegetarian and vegan products. Cultural differences. In some regions, vegetarianism and veganism can be less common, which leads to a misunderstanding or lack of options. Problems with food outside the house. In public places such as airports or stadiums, the choice of vegetarian and vegan dishes can be limited. Limited opportunities for children. In schools and children's institutions, the choice of vegetarian and vegan dishes may be insufficient. For tourists, this may mean that you need to plan food in advance, especially if you travel to regions with a limited choice. For local residents, this becomes a source of disappointment, especially if they want to adhere to a healthy and ethical diet. High prices for gyms and fitness services. Sports and services in the United States can be quite expensive, especially in large cities and prestigious clubs. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The high cost of membership. Monthly membership in the gym can cost from $30 to $3,100 or more, depending on the level of the institution and its location. Additional fees. Many gyms are charging additional registration fees, personal training, or access to certain services. Limited opportunities for saving. Unlike some countries, the USA has less opportunities for saving on fitness, for example, through corporate programs or discounts. The high cost of personal training. Personal training with the coach can cost $50, $100 per hour, which makes them inaccessible to many people. Limited access in rural areas. In rural areas, gyms can be rare, and their services can be expensive. Problems with contracts. Many gymnasiums require signing long-term contracts, which may be inconvenient for those who are not sure of their plans. Limited opportunities for free training. In some cities, access to free sports grounds or training parks can be limited. For tourists, this may mean that maintaining the physical form during the trip can be expensive. For local residents, this becomes a serious financial burden, especially for those who want to regularly play sports. Problems with the availability of public beaches. Although there are many beautiful beaches in the USA, access to them can be limited, especially in popular tourist areas. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Paid access. In some places, access to the beach can be paid, which increases rest costs. A limited number of places. In popular beaches such as Miami Beach or Santa Monica, there may be too many people, which reduces the pleasure of rest. Parking problems. Parking next to the beach can be expensive or inaccessible, especially in peak seasons. Limited amenities. Some public beaches may not have enough amenities such as toilets, showers, or changing cabins. Problems with cleanliness. In some places, the beaches can be polluted by garbage or algae, which makes the rest less pleasant. Limited access for people with disabilities. Not all beaches are equipped with ramps or other amenities for people with disabilities. Safety problems. Some beaches can have strong trends, jellyfish or other dangers, which requires caution. For tourists, this may mean that you need to plan a trip to the beach in advance in order to avoid disappointments. For local residents, this becomes a source of inconvenience, especially if they want to relax with their family. Difficulties with the search for affordable housing in tourist areas. In popular tourist zones of the United States, such as Miami, Hawaii, or California, it can be difficult to find affordable housing. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. High rental prices. In tourist zones, housing rental can be much more expensive than in other regions. For example, renting an apartment in Miami Beach can cost $3,000, $3,000, $5,000 per month. Limited proposal. In peak seasons such as summer or holidays, housing supply can be limited, which leads to an increase in prices. Additional fees. When renting housing in tourist zones, additional fees are often charged, such as resort fees or cleaning fees. Limited opportunities for long-term rental. In tourist zones, many owners prefer to rent housing for a short time through platforms such as Airbnb, which makes long-term rental inaccessible. Quality problems. In some cases, affordable housing can be of low quality, with poor furniture or insufficient maintenance. Limited access to amenities. In tourist zones, housing can be located far from shops, restaurants, or public transport. Booking problems. In popular places, housing can be reserved for months in advance, which requires early planning. For tourists, this may mean that you need to book housing in advance and be prepared for high prices. For local residents who want to move to tourist zones, this becomes a serious financial burden. Limited opportunities for the use of public spaces. In the USA, especially in large cities, access to public spaces can be limited. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The lack of parks and squares. In some cities, especially in the center, parks and green zones, it may not be enough. This makes a vacation in nature inaccessible. Limited opportunities for measures. In some public spaces, events such as picnics or concerts may be limited or prohibited. Security problems. In some parks and public places, it can be unsafe, especially in the evening. Limited access to amenities. In some public spaces, there may not be enough amenities, such as toilets, benches, or playgrounds. Problems with cleanliness. In some places, public spaces can be polluted by garbage, which makes them less attractive for relaxation. Limited opportunities for outdoor activities. Some parks may not have enough infrastructure for outdoor activities, such as bicycle paths or sports grounds. Problems with accessibility for people with disabilities. Not all public spaces are equipped with ramps or other amenities for people with disabilities. For tourists, this may mean that it will be difficult to enjoy a vacation in public spaces, especially if you stayed in the city center. For local residents, this becomes a source of disappointment, especially if they want to take a break from the bustle of the city. High prices for communication services. Communication services, such as mobile communications and the internet, in the USA can be expensive, especially compared to other countries. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. The high cost of tariffs. Unlimited tariffs for mobile communications and the internet can cost $50, $50, $100 per month, which makes them expensive for many people. Additional fees. Many operators charge additional fees for activation, roaming, or use of certain services. Limited opportunities for saving. Unlike some countries, the United States has less opportunities for saving on communication services, for example, through family plans or discounts. Coding problems. In some regions, especially in rural areas, the coverage of mobile communications and the internet may be weak or absent. The limited choice of operators. In some areas, the choice of operators can be limited, which reduces competition and leads to high prices. Problems with the quality of the internet. In some places, the internet speed can be low, which makes its use uncomfortable. Limited opportunities for tourists. Tourists may encounter high roaming prices or the need to buy local SIM cards. For tourists, this may mean that you need to be prepared for additional contacts for communication and the internet. For local residents, this becomes a serious financial burden, especially for families with a limited budget. Problems with the availability of quality education in some regions. Although there are many prestigious educational institutions in the USA, access to quality education can be limited in some regions. These are the main reasons why this becomes a problem. Inequality in financing. Schools in poor areas often receive less funding, which leads to a lack of resources and low quality of education. Limited access to higher education. In some regions, access to universities and colleges can be limited, especially for students from low-income families. Problems with the quality of teachers. In some schools, qualified teachers may lack, which reduces the quality of education. Limited opportunities for additional education. In some areas, access to circles, sections, and other additional educational programs may be limited. Problems with infrastructure. In some schools, there may not be enough modern equipment, textbooks, or even basic amenities such as heating or the internet. Limited access to preschool education. In some regions, access to kindergartens and preschool institutions can be limited, which makes it difficult to prepare children for school. Security problems. In some schools, especially in large cities, there may be safety problems, which reduces the quality of the educational environment. For tourists who plan to move to the United States with children, this can be a serious problem. For local residents, this becomes a source of inequality and limited opportunities for the future. Conclusion: the United States is a country with enormous opportunities, rich culture, and diverse landscapes. However, like any other country, it has its drawbacks and features that can become serious obstacles to tourists, immigrants, or even local residents. From high housing prices and medical services to difficulties with transport and cultural differences, each of the 50 points considered in this story emphasizes that life in the USA may not be as simple and comfortable as it seems at first glance. For tourists, it is important to plan a trip in advance, taking into account possible difficulties such as high expenses, a language barrier, or limited access to public services. For immigrants, adaptation to life in the United States may require significant efforts, especially when it comes to finding work, housing, or integration into local society. Even for indigenous Americans, many of these problems, such as high taxes, stress at work, or limited access to quality education, become part of everyday life. However, it is important to remember that each country has its pros and cons. The United States, despite all its shortcomings, remains one of the most attractive countries for life, study, and travel. The main thing is to be prepared for challenges, carefully plan your actions, and remain open to new experience. Do not forget about the useful services that we indicate in the fixed comments. Subscribe to the channel, like it. Good rest for everyone.